We'll call to order. Good evening and welcome. This is our last set of hearings to meet with department heads on aspects of the capital improvement plan. And then we will vote at our next meeting, which we will, as is our custom. We kind of do all the hearings and do the discussion and we vote at that very end in a separate meeting. Without further ado, the police department, Chief Gray. Why don't we do one set of introductions, because we have two new chiefs, a bunch of new finance committee members, and it's your first inaugural trip to the finance committee, so welcome.
Charles Gray, Chief of Police. Nice to meet you all.
And I'm Ray Santilli, the Assistant Town Manager.
Okay.
Well, some of you don't know me. Some of you don't want to know me.
You want to start, Sasha? And then we'll go.
Sasha Weinrich. This is my first year on the Finance Committee.
Hi, I'm Divya Bhatnagar. Nice to meet you all. This is my first year as well.
Liz Guerin, this is my third year on the Finance Committee.
Bill Callahan.
Chris Nobley, you're on the committee, Chief.
Karen Blake, 7th year on the committee.
Tim Shearhart. I forget how many.
And also for the new member, Lynn Savage is our Finance Director.
Phil McCarthy, Fire Chief.
Okay, great. Okay, so I think it would be worthwhile, Chief, if you could just discuss. We walked through kind of everything that was on the list.
Sure.
Everything kind of on your list for capital projects, and we had the discussion with the town manager, and we talked about how we were spacing the different items. But I think it'd be worthwhile to start with you and just hear you talk about what your assessment has been of the capital needs of the department, and then how you're feeling about the and then kind of we can walk through each project on its own. But
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. When I took over as chief, I did an analysis, a very thorough analysis of the department and what we needed. And after doing that, speaking to command staff officers, we came up with the items you have before you. One of which is the radio project, which is, we realize that our radios are coming to the end of their lifespan, and we're looking at replacing them along with fire. So we went out and found radios that, we can get that will solve some of our issues with our communications. We're coupling that with the capital expense that we have for the radio projects that we've been doing, and we feel that having these radios are going to last us the best bang for our buck over the next few years, and it's going to solve some of the problems we came up with.
Okay.
That's the first one. The second one is the listed as the carport garage, right? It's important to remember that when we had the station built in 2010, that was actually originally on the list of things to do, and it just kind of never got completed. So in essence, we're just completing the police station the way it was supposed to be. It's going to take the vehicles out of the elements. Whereas like this morning when it was snowing, the officers have to go out there and clean their car off. They're in the snow, they're slipping on the ice and whatnot. And it's also going to solve some of our issues with storage, traffic trails you see around town. We put those away for the winter. It's going to solve the issues of keeping them out of the elements too. So again, it's actually just finishing the project from 2010.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess that's all of it. So,
Question.
sure.
If I could.
Yeah.
Because the numbers just sort of like jump off the page, so
Sure.
I kind of have to ask it.
Sure.
I think your head count in your department is, what, 53?
Civilian and sworn, around there, yeah. I think it's 56, but
Okay.
Is it too high?
And you need to have 65 radios.
correct. Okay, so we have personnel, each one's assigned a radio. We do have some spare ones that we use in case someone has a radio that's down. And we also have radios inside the schools that is inside the main office, which has been given to the administrative staff should there be an emergency in the schools. They're issued radios as well.
We also have reserve police officers, we
Right.
have auxiliary police officers, and we have retired police officers who do police details. So they're all, so for sworn personnel, we have 39 on payroll. But we have a bunch of extra people who you're not aware of who are on unpaid, not paid status, auxiliary reserves, and the retired officers who do details. Plus, as the chief said, we also keep radios in the schools in case there needs to be instant communications.
I see, and they all speak to each other.
I hope so.
Correct.
That's a good thing. And so these are brand-new portable 6,500.
Karen, may I make
Motorola.
just a suggestion to put the mic a little closer, because that way they can hear you at
They
home
could
as you're
hear me.
speaking.
Right. So we have 65 new Motorola
Proposed.
6,500 radios, portable radios. And the school system has some of them, schools have some of them. All of the officers have them, and some reserve officers have
Well,
them.
all the reserves, all the auxiliaries, and then the retirees who do details.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, as the chief said, any of them go out of service, need maintenance, you need to have some backups to be able to be
Okay.
used.
So that brings that whole total up to about $247 some odd thousand dollars.
Yes.
And we're bonding that, I take it. Yeah.
Right. Good. I guess my main question was, I know one of the big things to come out of the 9/11 study was talking about how the different communication systems can talk to yourself. So I'm imagining that you've met with the fire chief and made sure to kind of look through that so that to the extent that you need to communicate with each other in
Absolutely.
some sort of emergency
We actually
situation, you
currently
that.
have that capability now,
Right.
where we can hear them, they can hear us, we can talk amongst each other,
Right.
and it expands over to different networks and whatnot. But
Okay.
absolutely, that's a
All right.
priority.
Yeah.
It's different channels on the same radio.
Okay.
What actually happened the other day is, for a small amount of time, about 20 minutes, police radios did go down. They were able to keep up communication on the fire side.
Okay.
So we do have that capability.
Great. Great.
The radios have multiple channels.
Right.
Was it a maintenance thing?
It's a maintenance thing, we're having some issues with the radio system, some outdated stuff, so it came down to a maintenance and repair issue.
So that begs the question, Chief. I know we have it out for 2019. Is it something that we should probably reprioritize to this current year,
So-
coming year?
Our radios that we have now are still within their lifespan, and we feel that we can still use them until such time as FY19 when that comes up for the capital plan. So we're comfortable with the radios we have now. We just did some forecasting and decided that, this is going to be on the radar down the road. We want to make sure we're ready and prepared.
The 20-minute glitch wasn't as a result of the radios, it was a result of the infrastructure.
Right.
So the radios don't have an impact on that.
I consider the whole thing to be,
I understand, but just to make it clear that even if we had a brand-new radio, we would have had the same problem because of the infrastructure.
Is that a software thing?
No, it's sometimes it's the location, it's, you sometimes have to take the system down in order to maintain it. Sometimes you actually have the sunspots that interfere, whatever, because it's basically a series of antennas that connect the communication system.
Magnetic. It's magnetic field, sometimes it crisscrosses, so it doesn't work properly.
I have a question. Besides these capital projects, have you assigned any special budget for training? What is your training process for your
Well,
police officers?
So
That's
we'll
our-
have
that's in the
that
operating
through in the
budget.
operating budget.
Okay.
So we'll go through that, yeah. So but those budgets aren't out yet. So we'll do the operating, I think we have scheduled for March. Should come back for that.
if I could just ask a question on the storage and the carport.
Yes, sir.
What was the choice between going with that as opposed to a full garage? Because you're saying the vehicles are outside, exposed to the elements now.
Correct.
So help me, take me through that.
It's sort of a best practice, and other departments have it. It's not a carport with doors and stuff, it just keeps the elements off the cruisers. But the storage part is the garage where we can keep the traffic trailers, any other equipment that we need to keep out of the elements and secured. So it's the sort of the best option as far as, being fiscally responsible and yet taking care of the equipment.
Okay.
So that's the amount that would cost to have garages put in would be insane. So that's the best way to do it, we feel.
Okay, good.
And we're also gonna need variances too, because it's gonna border on the property line. So that's a whole nother discussion with another group of people.
Yeah, I mean, my first thought was that maybe you didn't have enough parking, because I know it's not, because I imagine you need room for 2/3 of your officers at any given time, right? Or at least, because that's going to happen every shift change. You're going to have 2/3 of the force in the.
Right, this is just for the marked cruisers, the ones you see on the streets every day in the back of the lot. The other cars that we have, the detective vehicles, mine, the command staff, those aren't going to be in the carport right now. That's
We have more than enough parking
Yeah.
space, and this will
Okay.
just, it will supplant, because
Right.
parking spaces will become the carports in the garage.
Okay. Okay. All right. Any other questions? So I think we covered the radios pretty well. Any other questions on the carport/garage? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ray.
First is always easy.
What about the second one?
We'll find out, right?
Chuck, what'd you do to the seat? Seems low.
That's all by design, ours are up high.
Yeah.
Don't.
Okay, Chief. I think we could run it pretty much the same way. Talk about kind of, I think you have projects out 4 years, so maybe talk about the priorities and what you see as the
So-
priority and the staging, and if you have any concerns, and then we can talk project by project.
Okay, so similar to what the new police chief did with his staff, I did that when I got in. I met with my staff, and we did an analysis of what we thought we needed over the next 5 years. The first priority was the brush forestry vehicle that we've put on there. This will be a multi apparatus. It won't be just for the forest, brush fires. What we're looking to get is a pickup truck, and we'd be able to put a skid with a pump and a water tank in it that could be removed, but it would be available for us during our brush fire season. This past year, we didn't have anything. We relied on the state to assist us at some of the brush fires we had at Wire Hill and around that area. We had to lay lines into it, hundreds if not thousands of feet of hose in order to get water to the areas that we had a brush fire. So this will enable us to get the vehicle in there with water, quickly put it on the fire, but we'll also be able to use this truck to pull our fire safety house. We'll be able to use it during the winter, put our ice rescue equipment in it. We'll use it to pick up equipment at fire scenes, return bottles to the station. So it'll be a multi-use. I know we call it the forestry vehicle, but it'll be a multi-use vehicle. We'll get a lot of use out of it. The other item that we also put in was for the radios. Same situation. Our radios are in, we bought them 1 year after the police department. These radios will come with an increase in wattage. So again, similar to what the police department will see as improvements, we'll see those also. So the other items is a new engine. We're looking for a new engine. Currently, we have engine 1 and engine 3, both 2004 engines. Right now, they're 13 years old, and we're having some mechanical issues in there. As any apparatus gets older, it increases in some of the maintenance costs. So we're looking to update the apparatus fleet, and that's why we've felt that there is the need for the replacement of the engine at that year that we put it in.
Right. So yeah, the radios and the new engine truck would come in FY '20, and then just the ambulance.
And then the ambulance, that would be 5 years after we just received the ambulance that we purchased this past fiscal year. That ambulance is in service now. It's running out of Station 2. Already has over 4,000 miles on it. That ambulance, obviously is out. We're approaching 3,000 ambulance runs a year. So they do quite a bit of runs. And that's just incidents. It's not counting the response that they do on the fire side. So we just felt being able to replace those ambulances every 5 years, it'll keep us, keeping those low maintenance problems that we've had with some of our older vehicles.
And we're not going to replace an ambulance every 5 years. We're going to replace an ambulance, every other ambulance every 5 years.
Right.
So basically, we're replacing an ambulance every 10 years.
Right. Okay.
And it's a domino effect. So barring any unforeseen catastrophic motor vehicle accident or whatever, you know, one of the two ambulances will move down to be the backup ambulance, and then the new ambulance. So it's a little domino effect. Same way as with the pumper trucks,
Right.
because we have one spare, two actives, one spare.
Okay.
So, just question, so is there anything left of value at the end of that?
There is, because...
You'd be amazed,
There
yes.
is, there is, because the forestry vehicle that we had was a 2002, and that was traded in towards the purchase of the ambulance. We ended up getting almost $24,000. We got $23,500 for it, for a 2002 vehicle. You know, so there's a use out there, maybe for rural departments where they don't do as many runs, but they're able to use funds to put that in service.
And I'll give you two examples. The ambulance we replaced had a blown engine. Well, another community ended up buying the ambulance knowing that they still got a better deal than having to buy a brand new ambulance just by having to replace the engine, which we didn't deem because of the age of the ambulance, but they felt it good. One of our former ladder trucks is still in operation in one of the rural western part of the state communities, because it just doesn't have the kind of activity that we might have or another community might have.
So do we have is there a standing policy for how these assets are managed? I see Lynn nodding at you.
Yes, we do. She's answering behind me, but yes, we do. Trust me, I've been trained well. Yes, we do. She nods, I nod.
Absolutely. Usually when we're buying a new vehicle, we always look at what the options are for trade-ins against that reduced cost.
I think that's good to know, because I think folks that aren't necessarily tuned into this are going to have that question.
Yep.
Well, I know what I do with my vehicles. What do we do as a town? So
Yeah.
that's good.
Well, it's a lot no different. If you're trading in your personal car, you get certain value versus if you try to sell it on your own, and we make those kind of decisions.
Okay. Great. Thanks.
I'm back on the radios again, I'm so
Yes.
sorry.
Gonna get the same answers again.
So we don't have Motorola's here. We have APX6000XE radios. Is there any reason?
Yeah, they are Motorola's.
They are Motorola's? Okay.
They will probably be a little different. Ours are designed for fire departments. The knobs might be a little bit bigger in case a firefighter with his gloves on is trying to turn it. They could be different related to fire conditions, but they're going to be the same reception, and we'll be able to communicate with each other.
The same channels.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The usage is different, so they're different model kind of radios.
Yeah, I can see that, but in a pinch, one could use the other.
Not really, because the police primary channel is going to be on the police radio. The fire primary channel is going to be on the fire radio.
Primary
Can
channel.
someone be on the joint channel? Yes, but again, each department will have enough sufficient stock to take care of themselves.
So that there is a possibility of
again,
communication in
the
any
radios
case.
come with certain holders, certain mics or whatever, so you can't just give a fire radio to a police officer and say, okay, use it with your other equipment, because he doesn't have the proper holder, doesn't have the proper microphone, et cetera. So they all come fully stocked for their appropriate use.
Thank you.
Anything else? No? No, I'm good too. We're all set.
I'm good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Second year, good too, right?
Switch.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, sorry. I know, huh?
So, Bill, we're here mostly to talk about the pretty significant change in our request, but I'm happy to talk about our other requests also. So what we're handing out and what we're kind of planned to talk about is our very significant change. But maybe I'll just start with the other ones, and then we'll move into that. Is that okay, or how would you guys like me to handle that?
No, I think that works.
Okay, so the other one is, currently, we're looking at redoing the sports turf up at the high school. We're planning for that this year with the idea of implementation next year. Jim's been working really hard on that. I think that's something we've talked about a bunch.
Right.
Kind of the plan is go there. Every year, we do ask for $100,000 in IT. We've committed last year's funds along with next year's funds to support our cloud movement here between town and schools. So that really is a joint project between schools and towns. So we aren't talking about what's going to go with that money, is really just kind of moving to the cloud, which is something that has been great, and we needed about $200,000 worth of infrastructure, so we're working together on that. The other projects that we have here, the Atkinson roof, and then we're going to talk about our bigger project. We still think it's important. The roof needs to be replaced, but we also have a significant renovation for Atkinson planned down the line in many years as part of our project around elementary school classrooms. So whether or not we can move that, change that, once we really get the architects on board, and that is something we're going to work on. Similarly, you'll see that a lot of our work is around these elementary schools, which actually play into our, and so we're not going to replace a roof and then take down some of the roof. I mean, the idea here is really to be thoughtful about that long term. So although there are placeholders there, we really need to think about how do we phase the second phase of our work here around elementary school classrooms. So there are placeholders, but I would say there's going to be some flexibility and movement. That's been really clear in communication with the town manager. We're working on this collaboratively. So, so I think really our only big projects other than that is some district-wide paving in FY21, something we put on last year. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, we had Beta come in as the firm that DPW uses to assess pavement around town. And actually, they've completed their report and given it to me, and we're going to meet, what's today, Tuesday? On Thursday, to review the report, just to kind of figure out a plan for that year of doing the pavement and a good plan, a timeline for completing those projects.
Jim, the DPW has a good, like a 5-year, maybe 3-year plan where they identify and triage. We're not seeing that here. We see it all out here, and I know driving down to the high school once in a while, I hear the nice little cracks in the...
Right, and actually, that's what we're putting in place. By bringing Beta in, it's that we hadn't had that assessment done previously, so we're doing it, identifying all the needs, and they're at different levels. If you go to one school, it might just be that you need to skim and put another coat down, and another one you have to do like a renovation of the parking lot. And then going forward, we'll just maintain a schedule to keep them where they should be.
And that's not to say, I mean, if you've driven to the high school, DPW's been out there fixing the road too. So we're not, this is just kind of the big stuff, right?
It looks like it's a hard thing to keep smooth right there at that corner. So I appreciate that.
And dry.
And dry, that's right. It seems a little wet.
Okay.
And so just any questions on that before we...
No, I mean, I think the sport turf we've been hearing about for a long time. We've been setting aside the money, so I think that's just a good story to highlight advanced planning. We've been thinking about it and putting aside money, kind of pre-funding it. So, that's always great. And the IT story continues to be, more positive with more devices and more students' hands. We talked to Chris for a long time last week. So if we don't talk about IT this week, it's because we wore him out last week. So I think there's a lot of good news on those items. So I think I'm all set. Any other
question on the IT? It jumps, doubles, a couple years out.
Yeah, that was a thought by the town manager prior to my arrival, that, IT is something that we continually want to invest in. And so the idea was in his planning is let's double it when we can. And so the idea is that those funds, once we get done with the cloud, will actually be able to be used by the schools for student technology and infrastructure. So we're pretty excited about that jump. We know it's coming.
Well, we heard some great things last week. So
Yeah,
this
it's
is
really
exciting.
And on the school side, I'm happy during when we present our budget. You know, I just simple number. Our goal was to get 300 new devices in students' hands in the last year. So January of last year to January right now, we've actually gotten 752. So like we're really moving. We're almost at 2,000 student devices in the district, which is, if you remember a few years ago, I think we were under a few hundred. So it's moving in the right direction, but with increased student devices is an increased need for an infrastructure, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm happy to talk about that when we come back for the budget presentation.
The other rationale behind that number is similar to what you were just saying about, you know, the pavement plan, was that with IT, you want a 5-year replacement plan.
Yeah.
And based on the value of our infrastructure, 200,000 is what does that.
Yep, understand that.
Because you're going to have to be replacing routers and all
Exactly.
that infrastructure.
And we are. I mean, we did the middle school over break. I mean, it's like as you can see, the same if I brought Mike Grant as Chris. I mean, these guys are really planning, thinking ahead. It's exciting, and working collaboratively, which I think is really important. So our big conversation, we gave you a packet of information. Some of you may have seen this as parents of students in the North Andover Public Schools. The front is just a letter I sent to the entire community to try to, in simplest forms, although it's 2 1/4 pages, so I violated all rules of simplest forms, try to explain what we were trying to do around an elementary school classroom. So I think for those of you who were here last year and those of you who are new, one of the major concerns I've had as a superintendent is our class sizes. We are among the largest in the state in terms of average class sizes. If you look at elementary, just even specifically, we are actually 4 students above per class the state average. So it's something that I heard when I came in as a new superintendent. Our class sizes are really big. It's something that when I walk into classrooms and I see 27, 28 kids and we're asking teachers to differentiate to meet the needs of all kids, it's concerning to me. And so, you know, it's something that we really focused on, not just me, but the school committee. It's our joint goal this year is really to address issues of class size. And so as we thought about that, and we thought about specifically elementary school classroom size, which is really what this is about, the challenge is we don't have any room. So we could add a whole bunch of teachers, but we don't have anywhere to put them. So, you know, that can be an overwhelming problem, but we just said, okay, well, let's do a study. And so we hired, and there was funds in here to think about elementary classrooms, which was this year's current money, and had been budgeted $1.5 million. And with a conversation with the town manager, we understood that that number may have to go up in really to really address this issue. So what we did is we hired an architecture firm, KB&A, and here's the full report that we're happy to send around. There's a link to it in the letter, whatever is helpful to you. It's a little dense. And we said, can you really think about how we might address the elementary classroom space issue? And they came up with 3 options. And so what I wanted to just walk you through the options and then tell you which one the school committee recommended to the Board of Selectmen, which is now. The first option was to add on space at 3 of our elementary schools. So to add on classrooms at Atkinson, Franklin, and Kittredge. And part of the additional issue with adding on is in some of those classrooms we have portable classrooms. So we actually have to add above and beyond what would be to replace the portable. I think it's really important to understand portable are like the ones that were wheeled in and still have the wheels on them. I mean, that's what portable is. It's not the ECC modular construction. It's wheels came on, and literally if you remove some flashing at our schools, you can still see the wheels. Okay, so that's the portables. They're end of life and have to be replaced, and that's actually why this funding was here to begin with, was to replace the portables. So to add at Atkinson, Franklin, and Kittredge, I think it's really important to say why not Sargent and Thompson. The Thompson footprint in the actual space, if you think of Thompson, we really cannot add on to the actual space there. There's nowhere to go. And Sargent, if we were going to do any construction at Sargent, it's the feelings of the architects that we should actually construct underneath the roof line. There's a lot of empty space in Sargent. If you've been there, there's a huge ramp. There's a lot of empty space. The other thing is Sargent actually has the most room of any of our schools. And so adding there is actually not going to alleviate as much pressure. We talked about what are the positives of that. One of the challenges of that is that we'd have to stage the construction. So how do we do that? Do we temporarily redistrict kids? Do we alleviate that? Also, we would not be adding anything to Sargent and Thompson, so it would require redistricting, which is always a challenging thing for schools. Not that you can't do it, but it's always a challenging thing. There's also a lot of cost in terms of temporary space. So if we did this, we would actually have to do some temporary space, which is a concern. So for instance, at Franklin, if we were going to add, we would actually be adding within the gymnasium. That's kind of the concept. The gym at the Franklin School is very small, so we'd actually be adding classrooms there. So what type of money would we have to spend to do that? It's also 3 construction projects, and so it would take a while. Another option, which was one that frankly none of us had ever thought about, which was to make, I think the school committee called it the mega school of Franklin, and to add a kindergarten wing to Franklin. Why Franklin? Well, if you actually just look at the space, Franklin has the most physical space in terms of being able to add. We couldn't really add that 16 classrooms at the Atkinson. The Kittredge doesn't have room either. And so Franklin made the most sense. So we looked at that, and the one advantage of that is it's one space. We would also be able to renovate Franklin, which needs significant renovation at the same time. Talking about swing space would be a major issue. We had to even put $2 million in swing space for that option, which, you know, swing space is always something that you're kind of grumpy about paying for because it's kind of like a sunk cost, and you just... Swing space is where you temporarily move kids, so you bring in portable classrooms, and it's just a sunk cost. You know, it's like an economist's worst nightmare, right? It's sunk, you never get it back, and right? So that's always an issue. And then the plan would be in phase 2. So phase 2 of this would be to go back and to renovate, do some renovations in Atkinson and Kittredge, because all 3 of those schools need some work. The last option, which is the one that ultimately the school committee voted to adopt and then was moved on to the Board of Selectmen for inclusion in the CIP, which is what we've included, is to construct a new kindergarten addition to the ECC. So, and to put 16 classrooms there. Currently, we have 15 classrooms, so if we just built 15, we're not addressing class size. So construct 16. The other advantage in either option 2 or 3 is when you put all the kindergartners classes together, you actually get the same class size across the district, right? So that's kindergarten registration, and knowing who's coming to kindergarten is one of the biggest nightmares in a school, because like last year in April, I would have said, oh, we can probably cut a kindergarten. And frankly, we should have added a kindergarten. Like, so you just get swings that are just really hard to know. You know from first to second, you know from second to third, but who's coming in kindergarten is a bit of a challenge. So to add a 16 classroom addition to the ECC and to create an early childhood center that really is early childhood, pre-K to K. This is a model that a number of other districts have used. We're actually going to go visit Somerville, Dedham, and Middleborough, all places that have done that. And then to do that, and then in the second phase, do renovations that to be named, that we just got ballparks for, at Atkinson, Kittredge, and at Franklin. The biggest project being at Franklin, because we have to do something about the gym.
Right.
And also to take care of the portables, and then put in there the possibility of adding additional classrooms. So my analysis, if you just take all the kids in elementary school right now, and I know that this is very coarse analysis, but if you take all the kids in elementary school and you divide it by the state average, which is 19.6 kids per classroom, we're at 23.8. So if you divide it by the state average, we would need an additional 18 classrooms. The 16 that are coming on would take care of most of that. So we would have to backfill and do some portables, but I'm also really cognizant, as I'm sure many in this town are, is we're doing some new development. So I also don't want to create a plan that only addresses our current needs. This plan would allow for, by building potentially additional classroom spaces at Atkinson, Kittredge, and Franklin, would actually be able to allow us to deal with increases in enrollment if that happens. At the same time, for instance, at Atkinson, if we didn't add additional classrooms, our art, music, and library space is not great. So we could actually easily move the money for additional classrooms to programmatic space and be very supportive of something like that. So ultimately, that's what we decided, and I think I presented to you kind of just a quick overview of the plan. The current plan is to actually put it in front of the ECC. As you can imagine, we're working with the folks looking at Hayes Field and how that will work. We're going to work collaboratively. Amy Mabley on the school committee is on that committee, so we're not crossing. We're going to work together. Biggest concerns, I'll tell you, are traffic. We have committed to get a traffic engineer in here to figure out traffic, because traffic there already is a nightmare. Right? And then another issue is playgrounds and how we're going to do that. Something we're already talking about with the folks with Hayes Field, thinking about whether or not we go to the CPC about that. So, and we did decide, if you look at the cost estimates, you can see those were here. This is what KBA estimated for us. We did decide to go for what we call option 3A, which is modular construction of the kindergarten space. And again, to be very clear, this is not wheels, this is the ECC. And if you haven't been in our ECC, basically the concept of modular is that they construct it and then ship it in. So they're not constructing on site. It's a cheaper, better, faster way. Less expensive. Thank you. Less expensive. I always get in trouble, so thank you. Less expensive, faster way to get it done. And we feel strongly that that will work and will work very well with the ECC, because that was the construction used there. So I thank you, Mr. Santoni, for that. And then you can see that was ultimately, and then we have estimates for the work that would need to be done at Atkinson and Franklin and Kittredge. We're also proposing, but that will come into, as the town manager has talked about, facilities master plan too.
Right. Great. I think I want to start with just a grand kind of scheme of things, because first of all, we're the finance committee, so when you come to us and you say, we're going with the lowest cost estimate, we're very happy. So I think that does make us very happy. And the first thing I'd like to talk about is the process. And I think I've mentioned this for a couple years running, that in the Facilities Master Plan 1, there was very little detail about the projects to, quote unquote, replace the modular. Because the programming was never really fully done. You guys, that's the programming. So it wasn't done back in 2010 with the Facilities Master Plan 1. And it wasn't, and certainly you weren't here to do it. So I think that's something that we would all agree it wasn't fully thought about. So there was going to need to be a change from what was in there, and it was kind of a placeholder, at the time, because we weren't exactly sure. And it's tough, and schools are probably the toughest thing to plan for, because the needs change a lot more. We're not going to double the size of our police force, very quickly, or fire department. So having said all that, I think we've come up in 12 months with a great round of options, done a lot of thinking about it. But I would say too, it hasn't been kind of a really long period to think about it. And when I say think, I really mean process. So I mean, there's been a lot of thinking about it, but I think as a town, when we approach these large capital projects, and they need some time to percolate through the community, because it takes a long time for people to really sit down and wrap their minds around what's going to be happening. And so, in general, if the school committee is supportive of this, I think, we're thumbs up. We definitely spent a long time talking with the town manager about the fiscal part, about using the money from the free cash, and we're okay with that. So I just wanted to say that in case someone's watching this for the first time. We had that discussion, and we went around and around, and we decided that at the end we'd still have plenty of reserves available, and we were okay with that. So that question, I think, unless anyone has a further thing, we were settled on. So I guess my only thought is, we're doing this in a very economical way, and I guess my only thought, one of my big thoughts was, is there a slower way that would get us to get the Mass State Building Authority to become involved? Because I know that that's a longer process, and I know we've started thinking about that for the middle school. And what was your thinking about that, and what's the benefit of going, for this quick solution versus a longer timeline one?
Yeah, great few questions. First of all, I understand that this was a quick process in terms of in general. The reality is, I think there's a sentiment among the school committee and many of our parents that we need to get classroom sizes down sooner rather than later. And, we are in a place where I'm struggling to put not put the 29th kid in a classroom. So I feel like there is some urgency there. Now, I understand that North Andover has had a tradition of having classes maybe that large, but I think many would argue that the complexity of the students that we are being asked to educate, along with our desire to keep kids in district and keep our special education out of district costs down, necessitate some work on this quickly. So I think there's some urgency there. I do think that we tried to be as transparent about this process as possible and invite people to come and to see it. And although it is the less expensive option, one of the things that I'm very excited about is for our kids who need and struggle the most start with us at age 3. And I worry about transition. So I worry about that. These kids are not going to have an additional transition. They are going to just be in the same space. And so there's really some educational benefit and thought into why this is the best option. If you asked me, I think much of the conversation that the school committee had about this had nothing to do with cost. It was what made the most sense educationally and what also made the most sense kind of structurally. And ultimately, the one that did that actually came in as the less expensive option, which is a really nice way to come. We didn't feel, I think the school committee did not feel like they were having to argue, well, what we really want is this, but we can only afford this. So first of all. Second of all, we brought some information about the Mass Building MSBA. The challenge with the MSBA is twofold. First of all, to me, our largest average class size in the district are actually at the middle school. And so our middle school is going to need some sort of plan. And the number for the middle school to do something is not going to be able to be this number. It's going to have to be potentially more. And so if we are going to do something about the middle school, our thinking is that we would use MSBA for that. Because the reality of the situation is last year 90 projects were put forth in front of MSBA, and they funded 16. You're looking at most communities. I think we just saw that a community voted last night to put their project in for the 6th time. Many communities actually have to submit their project multiple times.
Right.
And then the average ability to actually get something, once you get your statement of interest approved, to actually moving in is 6.5 to 7 years. So we're looking at like a 10-year process for MSBA. I think that's a safe analysis. And you're getting reimbursed 40% or so. So the feeling was for this project, it's probably not the most expensive project this town is going to have to think about. And B, because we were able to finance it in a way and we were able to modularly construct it, and we feel an urgency to say to folks, look, we're going to address elementary school classroom issue sizes in 6 to 7 to 8 to 9 to 10 years. To wait for reimbursement rate on a $6 million project felt like, in terms of where we were. And secondly, if we did this for this project, the ability for us to get another project funded is going to be even harder. And so we thought about that, and ultimately, because we were able to bring this project in within what we felt we could handle within free cash, the desire to do it quickly, this felt like the answer, because waiting 10 years to address this issue was going to be hard for us.
Jen, if I may too, 2 other points for Dr. Price. The 16 projects that were funded this past year, all were the 3rd or more request. None of them were either the request of the 1st or 2nd time.
Right.
And to address your earlier point, if you remember from the original facilities master plan, we actually flip-flopped the public works project and the school project in order to give Dr. Price a chance to come on board and assess the situation more thoroughly. So although from the budgeting of the process to now may seem quick, we actually took the last 2 years in order to give more time for an internal school department assessment and not have to do it in Dr. Price's first year, and give her a chance to really assess what she envisioned for the school system.
Right, right.
So I got extra time.
No, I mean,
MSBA will also not fund modulars.
right.
Yeah, we would,
They
the
won't
price
fund-
tag
okay.
would have gone up.
Right, okay.
So, for all those reasons, I mean, that's why we came forward with this plan in this way.
Right, I think that's really good information. I think, you know, the one part that I learned in you know, just some conversation about the MSBA is that it is a long and rigorous process that requires, you know, it might require the school building committee to get fired up and to get some members and to start doing the analysis. And I just wanted to make sure that to the extent we have to start this process, that we're engaged and we're starting to gather the inputs and put the pieces together so that we're ready. So if the answer is that
We're all in on that
it
one.
doesn't work for this project, that's a good answer as long as we weren't ready for it to work on this project. So if we're, you know, I think that, so you answered my question.
Yeah, thanks.
I'd just like to say, I think the significant piece to me is that you started with the reason and the outcomes that you're expecting out of this. And we talk a lot about buildings because we have wonderful buildings, but it's really what goes on within them that matters more than the structure itself. And this is a particularly challenging, because there's a yin and a yang in terms of how this town looks at it. I mean, there's this fondness for the Bradstreet School and what it did, but there's recognition of our town is much larger and spread out, and so you have people traveling further, so issues such as traffic and so forth are much more significant than they were even 15 or 20 years ago. So kind of weighing that piece, I think, is very important. And to what Bill was saying earlier, I think that's part of the reason why when I talk to people in this community, there's still a little bit of angst over the speed, because there's the digestion factor, however you want to call it. And the thing I would challenge in a good way to you and to the school committee is, how can we help get people connected to understanding this better? To, you know, how do we distill this and for lack of a better term, really market in a positive way? All right, here's the choices, here's the route, and here's why, and here's where your input's going to be considered, and make sure that people really feel confident that, yes, well, we can still be in the planning part of this, but all these things haven't been decided yet, and they are being evaluated, because I hear anxiety as I talk to parents around here. Is there really going to be concern about traffic, and how are you going to do that? And what about the transition, and how does that feel? And so I would just say that, you know, we're kind of moving from the regular season to the playoffs, so to speak. So the intensity level goes up. So whatever you can do, I think, to help address that more, because from a financial standpoint, we're, as Bill said, this is great. We're brilliantly laying out and done, but it's really how it feels and how the community responds to it that's as important as that it's financed the right way and efficiently.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you I'm going to meet with all the PTOs. You know, as you know, I sent this letter to 4,000 families. You know, we're really trying. You know, I think one of the things that's interesting to me is, you know, we had a series of meetings in December, very sparsely attended, right? And so, you know, and this letter went out ahead of them. You know, I think now it's becoming real.
Right.
And so, you know, the good thing is that we have town meeting in May, so we're going to work really hard as myself, but also the school committee, to kind of really listen to people and hear people. And the other thing I would say is, you know, as you know, with all building projects, we haven't made a ton of decisions yet. I mean, we've just made a decision of site and cost. What is going to happen there is really up to kind of, that's really what we got, the work we got to do. So there's a lot of decisions to be made.
I think that's really important that again, that people understand that, because they're, again, in talking to folks, there's a sense that there's plans in place and it's off and rolling. And I know that working with a modular design, the previous experience with the ECC is, you know, you can control costs, you really can look at all those different scenarios of what can go sideways. So you don't have as many of those worries, so focusing on kind of really designing it, you have a lot more time for that.
And obviously, there will be a school building committee that will be put forth that, based on the town charter, and it will include members from the community appointed by the town moderator and members from the school committee. So that's all to be done. Really, at this point, we're asking the town to approve site and cost.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that is important, because looking at this, one of the first questions I came up with was, well, what if things change down the road? Because we all know things change down the road, and suddenly what used to be your middle school, or what used to be your high school is now your middle school, and you suddenly have a big new high school. And I'm looking at this saying, could this ever be anything but early childhood education and kindergarten? And looking at this plan, I'm saying to myself, probably not, because there's not a very big gym, and, so that would be one of the questions I would ask. But I think what you're saying is that's not even set at this point.
Yeah, and I would also say, really, if I could wave a magic wand educationally, I would follow Boston's lead and have universal preschool for kids. And so the cost of that, I can get off of my high horse. My view on that is, let's invest in preschool rather than prisons, right? That's my view. This would be a perfect place if we ever made that decision as a town to have our preschool and then go back to the K-5 model. So I agree, it probably could never be a high school, right?
Or even a freestanding
elementary
school.
or a freestanding
Yeah.
elementary. But, I do think that there's a movement in this country. The city of Boston just announced that they're going to go to universal preschool. And it really is an educational move that many communities could and should make over time. I understand realistically that's not going to happen anytime soon. But this would be a fabulous standalone preschool. And, the preschool model is one that is only expanding. So could it be something else? Yes. Great, in my opinion.
Good question.
Okay, thanks.
You guys Bill and Chris talked a little bit about timing. But could you talk specifically, kind of the schedule of kind of when all of these things may take place, or when you envision them taking place?
Yeah, so we can, Ray, jump in if I get it wrong.
No, I've already started chuckling.
So
He has a very aggressive schedule.
I mean, it's also selfish, because I have a 2.5-year-old.
your 2.5-year-old will be going to the ECC kindergarten complex. So, yes, we do have an aggressive timeline. And the aggressive timeline is to open our doors August of 2018. That is an aggressive timeline. So what does that mean? We're going to work really hard, even between now and town meeting, to get moving on this. We're going to obviously wait for approval to do anything, but we're going to start really working on this now, and kind of get some folks moving on this so that we can actually go out to bid in July or August on it, and then really get involved in the design phase starting right after town meeting into the summer, with the goal of doing some site work this fall, and kind of having the plans ready by the end of in the fall, so that we can actually order the modular construction, with construction happening next spring. I mean, construction happening internally in their site over the winter, with actual installation next spring. So this is an aggressive timeline. Did I get that right,
Yeah,
Ray?
in other words, little Joe will be able to attend the new. I'll cut right to the answer.
And what we will talk about this a little bit more probably when I come forward with my budget. One of the things here is, obviously that frees up 15 classrooms in our elementaries, and the idea here is to backfill those classrooms. Hopefully, with approval of the school budget for next year, we will have 4 of those classrooms already ready to be backfilled with teachers. But the good thing here is 15 of those teachers are moving to the kindergarten space. So we don't have to hire 15 teachers to open this building, right? So, and then we can slowly backfill over time in our operational budget the places that have the biggest need in terms of numbers of kids, and complexity of kids. I always like to think of 2 aspects. Numbers and complexity are both important. So, people have been asking me about the staffing, which I'm sure you get when you talk to folks in North Andover too, is that really the staffing to open up the kindergarten complex is we have to add 1 additional teacher, 1 additional teaching assistant, and then some specialists, and we have to think about the administrative structure. That's really it. But it's the backfilling the classrooms that is going to be important. So, although it is an aggressive construction timeline, we're being very thoughtful about a staged personnel timeline, if that makes sense.
That's really going to be the heart of my question too, because unlike a lot of the other capital improvement programs, we're pretty well fine with them, we haven't voted yet. This one does come with a operating cost incremental change. And I like the idea, like we began last year, we added 2 heads, used it for furniture, curriculum.
We actually had used one for Thompson, so we only have one for curriculum.
Thank you. But that's the whole goal there was to slowly increment. You got it again in this current year operating plan budget that I've seen. That's good. But the way I actually see this as well is you've got 16 or 15 or 16, doesn't matter. You're going to backfill immediately from existing positions. Not backfill, you're going to move them. But then you got a total of 40, though. When I added up the numbers here, you got 9 U's from the different Atkinson, 2, 3, 4s that you got in there. That's 9. And then you're going to have open space of 15, so it's a total of like, am I reading this? 24 spots that really, 24 classrooms that probably need a teacher at some point in time. So the question really is laying it out, how, what are the costs? And how are we going to get there?
Yeah, so it's 25 because we might, if you really got to having this chart here at the end talks about it, yeah. So it's a total of 25, but we need to remember, like, we're talking many years out here. So to get, so 16 is immediate, and then the additional 9 come over doing the construction at Franklin, Atkinson, and Kittredge. So, I mean, you're talking 20, 24, 25 that we're actually going to be there, I think. That's kind of the thinking, and again, that's part of Facilities Master Plan too, so I can't be specific about the numbers. So there's no doubt that we would need additional classroom teachers. A few things, you know, this year we have, you'll see that we have approximately $450,000 that we are adding to our budget. Some of that, as you'll see, is around structural issues. I'm really trying to get the structural issues out of the way so that when these classrooms come online, we can just pump the money into classroom teachers.
Yeah.
I've really worked to try to deal with the structural issues that I felt needed to be addressed as part of the school system. So that's one thing. So that's about 8 teachers a year if we just did teachers. $450,000 if we assume the similar rate of growth that we are having now. That's the first kind of answer to that. The second thing is, you know, we are eternally hopeful that the state is going to go through the foundation budget review process. That would mean approximately $3 million more to North Andover. That might be eternal hope. I'm hopeful. I mean, that would just solve our problem right there. So it's over time. I mean, the other thing is, if the town population does not warrant building those additional classrooms, we're not going to do it. So, you know, this is, again, if we make the decision at Atkinson that, you know, the class size is right where we want it to be, we're going to put money in the arts and the music, which doesn't mean that we're putting money into actual people. It's just renovating those spaces, so.
Part of my thinking all along is that any decision on the CIP does not commit us to future operating funds.
Right.
It's a very important part of my way of thinking. But I'm still curious, I'm talking to the money man now. If I had to, you mentioned 8 teachers for whatever number of total dollars, but what's the total cost of a teacher? Everything that you have to do, whether it be the benefits they get on top of a teacher, anything incremental. If I had to use a round number, Jim, what could I use for the teacher number per teacher?
We usually use $54,000 as the average starting salary of a teacher, and then 30% as the benefit cost.
Okay.
So
70.
70.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, you know, that is the reality. I mean, there's two, as I started this, if you're going to address class size issues, it's facilities and people. You know, the one thing that I feel strongly about with this plan is that you can do this over time. You know, it's not like you have to all of a sudden when you open the doors.
No. Unlike maybe Bill and Chris, I like the fact that there was a little bit of an expeditious role of getting what a building master plan might look like. And you had your options. I think that was wonderful. It was professional. I like all the background that was driving it. I like everything. The only thing that I didn't really have in my head yet was, okay, what's it going to mean 5-10 years down the road from here? So.
Yeah, and the thought I had was that, whether or not the town can support the additional teachers is not hopefully going to be constrained by the physical space.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
And to me, that's going to be decisions that have to be made in subsequent budget years individually. But at least we'll have the space to make those decisions rather than feel like, yeah, elementary class size is way higher than we would want, but there's not much we can do about it.
Okay.
That was important to me, to be able to make those decisions for that reason.
Okay.
I have a question about the modular construction.
You got this one.
In other words, what is the interior of the walls going to be looking like in 5 or 6 years? Do we have any input on the quality of the materials that go into the construction of this modular housing, keeping in mind that the MSBA doesn't fund modular housing? There's got to be some reason for that. But how can we control the quality of what's in the walls and be able to keep it up?
The main reason they don't is because it's fairly new to public projects, and so they haven't really gotten around to addressing the use of modular construction. But we have the benefit of having a facility that was built just prior to me starting here 8 years ago. The Early Childhood Center was done through modular construction and has held up extremely, extremely well. And so yes, we get to determine what quality we put into the interior walls and other things like that. And so I would anticipate the same.
So in other words, for the plumbing, you'd want PEX and not, PVC pipe and stuff like that.
Your architect would spec it out just like you would any other building?
Yes.
And if you didn't know, if you just came to town today and walked into the ECC and didn't pre-know that it was a modular construction, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
Well, I have a little secret I have to share with you. I built the first modular house on Nantucket in 1983.
Is it still standing?
It is still standing.
There you go.
It came over on a barge. It had specifications. I had all of the as-built on it, and no one could tell the difference.
Right. If
they had known,
you would have no idea.
the Historical Commission on Nantucket would have had a bird.
Yeah. Same building code applies.
I actually
the
think
same building code applies.
I actually think it would be
Same
critical
everything.
for us to go visit that,
Yes.
so that we could
Let's
see if
have
it
a
really
site
held up.
visit.
Yes, and not now though, not till after town meeting, but I'm willing to go.
Oh, like May or June.
Yes,
maybe July.
exactly. No, I'll pay for it. It's not a problem. I'm happy to pay for my trip.
We're treating all of them.
But that's actually a very good point. Again, I think in the knowledge here, there's certainly a group of folks that we're all well aware that we have modular, it's been there 8 years, and again, you blindfold somebody, you couldn't tell, but there's a large segment of this community that's still not tuned into that, even though they've driven by it for 8 years. So again, just urge that we really double our efforts to make sure people understand it, because there's a lot of assumption of knowledge out there. And at the same time, remember, in the background, we're talking about the modulars over at the
Portables.
Portables and the modulars, and that. So,
Portables.
And so you've got right.
So that's just. So I think that's why we try to be a little careful to say portables, and I say wheels and modular. So,
exactly.
but I absolutely, and the other thing that I learned, because I did not know much about modular construction, is that one of the advantages of the reason we can do modular construction is we're adding a new space. So if things are straight and in lines and in boxes, modular works. If you start, so one of the challenges was, well, why couldn't you do modular construction at Franklin? Well, nothing was straight and in line, and it's hard to do that. So if you'll see in the facilities master plan, we add modular construction to Kittredge, because if you think right behind Kittredge, we actually have some modulars. We could add more. It's straight, it works. But in other places, you can't do it, and you have to stick build. So part of it is also just what you're doing. Does modular construction work? It doesn't work. It's not going to work at Franklin, especially as we have to put classrooms in a gym.
Right.
That green building, that's modular at Kittredge?
The prefab.
Prefab.
And then the ones that are connecting from the Kittredge, there's
To the gym.
to the gym. There's a corridor, the fifth grade classrooms, that's modular construction.
Again, distinguish the fact that modular is different from portable, the same
Right.
way as that expensive is different from cheap.
I apologize.
Or economical?
Hey, look, I use sunk costs in economics. I thought, at least I got that right. Yeah, it's okay. I'm good.
No, I mean, I think another big point, I mean, I'm a facilities manager, so I think about these things all the time. When I think about, like, you're building a brand-new building from the ground up, it's also much easier to predict the costs, and you're not dealing with construction in 4 different or 5 different sites. Each site brings its own, each site has permitting, each site has, a certain amount of money just to get off the ground. So the cost of each classroom there is relatively inexpensive. You're doing 16 at once. There's huge efficiencies there that you're not starting and restarting, and you're also not doing a lot of this construction on either school vacations or summer, when every contractor in the world is trying to do school projects in 10 weeks. And I've lived through the experience where the low bid construction company wins the contract and September rolls around and they're not done, and you start school 3 weeks late. So, I mean, I think there's also, for the continuity of education, not just for for every school will be better, because you won't have every school being a construction site for, several years. And, those are really high costs, and it really doesn't matter, it matters a lot in your budget if you're paying for it on overtime or at premium hours, but, you don't get any more construction for that. That's just additional cost, so. All right, any other questions?
I just have based on where this is going to go, will this affect the plan for the middle school field project at all?
Yeah, so that's I was saying the Hayes Field, middle school
Yeah.
field. So yes, I mean, so one of the things that's really good about our timing is that they are still in the very early phases of that.
Okay.
And like I said, Amy Mabley, our school committee member, is actually is working with that committee. So
okay.
I'm actually going to the committee for their next meeting. So we're working collaboratively. And we actually hope, like, for instance, the traffic study, it'll help them too.
Right.
So
right.
the idea here is that we're going to do a joint traffic study. And, I think they were pleased with at least seeing where we think we are going to place the structure. That's helpful for them as they plan. And so, I think if we were a year or 2 out on this, we might be in some trouble. But because they're in the beginning and we're in the beginning, I think it's actually going to work really nicely together. That's our hope.
Excellent.
That's our goal.
Yeah.
Well, you could have efficiency of site preparation.
Yes.
That would be the ultimate, overlap there. If you're moving equipment, you're moving land, bang, you got
Yeah.
both in one shot. Traffic.
Traffic,
all
I mean, like,
Yeah.
the first thing is that we both are going to request a traffic study, right? Because we need that together, so.
Yeah, and we've solved some interesting traffic issues in this town. We have some things that weren't designed to cross, and they seem to work out, so I'm kind
Yeah.
of hopeful.
We also have to go through some regulatory boards, both planning and conservation, with
Yeah.
some auspices over the project.
Good.
Okay, then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay. public comment. Do we have any public comment?
I just wanted to say one thing. You know,
Who are you? And
this process really started.
Identify yourself, sir.
Stan Limpert, underling to Ray Santilli, Assistant Town Manager.
That is
Yeah, I
your
know,
home.
I know,
That is
I
your
know.
home.
It's a large group. I'm not special in that regard. This process really began, to be perfectly honest, with the building of the Early Childhood Center. Because that started the space relief. I don't know if, as you all recall, the programs that are in the ECC were housed at Franklin and Sargent, and it really overstressed those schools to the extent that Sargent and Franklin both were having extreme space problems at that time. So this really, that was the first step in this space relief problem, which of course was started when we closed the Brad Street. I mean, that created the space problem because we had to move all those kindergartens back into the elementary schools. And so now you're seeing really parts 2 and 3 of a process now that hopefully will relieve those space problems, at least at the elementary school. As Dr. Price has pointed out, it doesn't address the middle school and other needs we may have, but at least at these levels, it does that. But we did take that first step, and very successfully. It helped really, at least Franklin and Sargent, in that respect, to have some relief from the space problems they were having up until that point. And it consolidated programs that really needed to be together, as Dr. Price points out. You know, we have all these students together, and now, you know, with the kindergarten, they'll be able to stay together. And, you know, to Mr. Nobley's point, you know, I think any of us who had students that went to the Brad Street, they had a great experience there. It was nice to have all the kindergartens, everybody of the same age in the same school doing the same thing. It was a wonderful time. It's true, we may have been a smaller community at that time, and it may not have had quite the bus schedules that we might have now, but I think it was a wonderful experience, and I don't see any reason why we can't duplicate that again with the new kindergarten. So you know, speaking for myself as a school committee member, I'm very supportive of this project. And again, you know, to me, this is a real North Andover style project. I don't know if you all observe some of our adjacent communities, but I would say, Mr. Callahan, they go to the other extreme. They'll vet stuff in the community for 20 years and not pull the trigger on something. So, you know, I'd like to think we're a little bit more pragmatic than that, and we get stuff done. So I think it's, you know, our style, and I think we're going to move ahead with this. So, I'll let you know.
This may not be a finance committee question, but I'm just curious that are parents worried about having their elementary age kids split between 2 different schools? Because I know in a district I came from, and that was one of the reasons I asked the question that I did ask, was that what if you change your mind and you want to put the kindergartens back at the elementaries? What can you use this building for? Because I know in the district I moved from in New York, that was a big deal. People did not want their kids split across 2 elementary schools. So, you know, having a kindergartner and a 3rd grader creates a drop-off nightmare.
Having a 3rd grader and a 6th grader creates a drop-off nightmare.
I agree, but it's just, you know.
There is worry.
There is worry about that,
There's
so,
worry, and,
yeah.
You know, we're going to do our best to address that worry around staggered starts and busing and
Yeah.
be thoughtful. Look, this is not perfect. I mean,
No.
there's challenges, but it
Yeah.
really was the best answer.
Not as a FinCom member, but as a parent who had a child at Brad Street, it was a great experience. So,
Yeah.
Just saying.
Thank you. Okay. I think all set with the hearing part. A new business, I don't know if we want to review the only new business I had was to review the schedule a couple weeks out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much appreciated.
Okay. Okay, so, let's see, why don't we look at the revised schedule? And on the, as I mentioned in an email today, the school committee operating budget public hearing is on the 26th. So this, Dr. Price's recommended budget is out, and with the school committee, they have not yet voted on it. On Thursday evening, they'll take public, have their public hearing, just as we have a public hearing. So that's certainly for anybody who's watching, that's a good opportunity to get input in early enough in the process to make a difference. So I think that's important for people to know, that it's a long process, and you have more influence earlier in the process than you do later, because things become sort of more fixed. Right. So I'd urge anyone who's watching to go to that. The operating budget will go to the selectmen on the 13th, February 13th. We did move things around a little bit. We haven't voted on the capital improvement plan, and we haven't heard from, and traditionally what we've done is we've had a meeting where the town manager has come and presented the operating budget as a whole, municipal operating budget, to us. And so, in kind of going back and forth with Andrew, he was saying we could do both in one, because we would have a meeting on one of the next 2 weeks, would simply be voting on the CIP. And whereas, we haven't taken any votes, but we haven't had any issues. We don't have any outstanding information requests. We're not waiting for someone to get back to us with anything, as far as I'm concerned, right? So I think, in a sense, we should take some time to vote, and we certainly, if anyone comes up with something they want to know, we can certainly.
So what are you proposing?
So what I'm proposing is, instead of having a whole separate meeting just to approve the CIP and not do anything else, why don't we start the capital budget, the operating budget process, and vote on the CIP at the same time?
Yeah.
I thought we changed that meeting to
To-
the 7th, and we got rid of the 14th. I'm just looking at my notes.
Yeah.
You're not gonna have the operating budget till.
We won't have the operating budget till the 14th. So I think we did.
For the 7th.
Yeah.
I think we did move it around a little bit, and this is even changed from what I remember as well. But as I thought about it, I think we went around and around on it. But that was one of the things we were talking about, that we'd have the operating budget on the 14th as opposed to the 7th, where we'd just have the CIP that we've had for
Understood.
a couple weeks.
So we skip the
In
7th.
terms of Sasha's point, you'd be moving the CIP vote from the 7th to the 14th,
Right.
rather than the operating budget up.
Right. And there was even some discussion with the manager about doing it on the 15th. But I think we can nail that down. But if we get the general concept right, that we would just push out the meeting a little bit so that we could accomplish more, and because we're going to have plenty of, now and then we're really in sort of crunch time.
Yep.
We'll, through March and April with the operating budget. So kind of like, let's maximize our time on task.
Yep, I think that makes sense.
Okay.
Yep, I'm good.
So our next meeting will be either the 14th
Or the 15th. And we'll see, yeah, depending on Andrew's availability. All right.
Was my thought. Didn't want to say it, but.
That's true. That's true. Okay. And then, as you can see, the Board of Selectmen votes on the operating budgets on March 6th. That's also when the citizen positions come in, and the warrant gets closed, and that's when we start our, meetings. And actually, our meetings are not, they're not on here. So I'll put them back in and send them around. But we spaced them out already. I think we can look at our
7th, 14th, 21st.
of 7th, 14th, and 21st of March.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Are we still on for the 7th?
Of March.
March.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And then we have our public hearing on the 3rd and vote on the 4th. Some years we've even done both on the same, we've even put 2 meetings into one. Had 2 meetings on one night, which we're allowed to do, open and close the public hearing after we take input and then vote. Yeah.
That worked pretty well.
Okay.
We're gonna vote on the budget on the 3rd, but here it says the 4th, so.
Right, so we'll just get it straightened out. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to combine the public hearing and the vote on the budget onto the 3rd. So there were, what we've done in the past is we've opened and had a public hearing, closed the public hearing, opened another meeting and said, let's vote on the budget.
Yeah.
We do have to you know, we do try to vote on the budget by the 4th, and we definitely have to have the letter done by the 13th or 15th. So, you know, so we'll work out the schedule. We'll work out the schedule. We'll get it in final form before the next meeting, certainly.
My suggestion, they want to consider the 4th, because the 3rd is actually a selectmen's meeting also.
Is it?
So to hold a public hearing and the vote, you might need town staff on the night of the selectmen's meeting on the 3rd. So
Right.
if you've got a choice, I would strongly recommend maybe Tuesday the 4th.
Okay.
Combine it into one meeting.
Yeah. All right, we'll take a look and see. I don't know if the public hearing has to be done on the 3rd
All because of the
because of the charter.
Is there a notation?
There's a notation charter 9-6-1.
Which is usually no more or no less, so it could be a little bit.
It could be a little, so, yeah, we'll run the traps on that and see. I mean, I think the general concept is right. We don't want to have, I mean, there have been some years, unfortunately, where we haven't had anybody for the public hearing, so we all get dressed and come out and sit here and open the hearing and no one comes, and that's not a particularly good, obviously, first of all, we want people to come, but, you know, and maybe we got to think about, I don't know, door prizes or something, but,
I like it.
yeah.
Do you have a FinCom Twitter account? Because you should just tweet.
Yeah?
You could have them spend quality time with Stan.
Yeah.
What if I bring donuts, Joe? Right?
Yeah?
I like it.
So no, I think we want to do that. I mean, we do have the town office's social media account puts it out, but we should, you know, but probably up the frequency on the public hearing and try to get it out there more.
And Stan is unencumbered starting that week, so it'll be good.
That's right.
That's true.
Okay. You're not going to the British Virgin Islands after your term of service?
I can cater to you.
Okay. Good. Okay. So that's the landscape sort of ahead of us. Any other thoughts? The only other thought that I had in the new business category, and I'm just exploring it, and I'll throw it out there. But one of the things I was thinking about is the trash contract is coming up, and I did read in Mass Inc. There's a general landfill crisis in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and all over the country that we don't have enough room to throw away our trash. It was talking about how communities are trying to reduce the amount of trash that they're putting in landfills because we're out of landfill space. You know, obviously we have an incinerator, but you know, it is a cost. And as the new contract is going out to bid, I looked and I found out how much trash we throw out. And we throw out a lot of trash. We have a fairly high amount of trash.
1,000 tons a year.
Yeah, but per household, it's well higher than the average. So part of what I was thinking about is maybe reaching out to the sustainability committee or some other people and say, like, you know, recycling and encouraging recycling and things like this, like that's great for the environment, it's great for sustainability. There are a lot of reasons why you'd want to do that. But there's also probably no clearer, you know, not best purpose of public dollars than to take trash and, you know, to throw away more trash than we need to in landfills when it could be recycled, which would be, you know, better for the environment, in some cases more economical and so forth. And so I was going to reach out.
You're talking about two different things.
No, I'm not.
What's coming up is the trash pickup contract. The trash disposal contract at Wheelabrator is not up.
It's not up?
That's ongoing.
That's ongoing?
So the contract you're referring to is the
Pickup.
trash pickup at the household or whatever.
And the tipping is separate.
Which is different than the dumping and the tipping at Wheelabrator.
Right.
That's, still has a few more years to run.
And what about the recycling pickup? Is that part of the,
Recycling pickup, we actually don't have a contract for recycling pickup.
we just get it free from Wheelabrator?
Well, no.
We get it free from Thompson Brothers?
Yes, so the recycling pickup is actually a result of 3 separate agreements that were the site approval for TBI on Holt Road.
Right.
So as part of those 3 agreements, TBI is required to pick up our recycling free of charge to the town. The benefit is we have a separate recycling disposal contract, which pays us $20 per ton at JRN. So there are really 4 contracts that are kind of sometimes intertwined and mistaken for each other. We have a trash pickup contract, which is currently with Northside. That will expire as of August of 2017. We have a trash disposal tipping contract with Wheelabrator. I can't tell you exactly how long that has to run. We have an agreement. There are 3 separate agreements with TBI, which is the recycling pickup, of which we don't have a contract with a vendor. It's TBI that's responsible, and contracts with, for lack of a better term, a third party. And then we have a recycling disposal contract that we went out to bid. And unlike many communities who either at best don't receive anything or have to pay to dispose of their recycling, we receive $20 a ton, and that's about 2,000 tons a year.
And a very animated discussion last night in the Board of Selectmen.
And a very animated discussion redux. It's been a couple of meetings, and there'll be a few more to go.
But am I correct in saying that if we threw away less trash, fewer tons of trash, would that financially benefit the town?
It would benefit from the tipping fee. It would not benefit from your trash pickup fee, because you're still going to have to do the same routes each day, each week throughout the entire town.
Right.
So that would have an effect on the tipping fee, yes.
Okay.
There's a payoff, but it's not as immediately identifiable, is what you're saying.
Correct. And well, it's not the big $500,000-$600,000 that we pay for trash pickup.
Right.
Right. You're always going to have the same truck do the same neighborhood. Whether they pick up 1 barrel at each house or 2 barrels at each house, you're still paying the same dollar amount for those routes to be handled every day, 52 weeks a year. The tipping fee is what's affected by the amount of trash generated.
Okay. But at some point, right, like,
It's a good discussion.
if the truck's going up, but I'm just saying, I don't think it's entirely that clear cut, because at some point, if you went to every house, the truck could make more stops, theoretically, if we were picking up fewer barrels, if you had less trash
Well,
per
again,
thing.
a number of communities, including the community I live in, has gone to 1-day pickup.
Yeah.
So they just flood the town on a Thursday. They have the automated trucks, so they only have, so they do recycling and trash pickup. You have a blue bin for your trash, a green bin for your recycling. But if you stay with the 5-day-a-week same routes, it's really not going to be impacted in that, because whether the truck finishes in 6 hours or needs 7.5 hours, you're still contracting for that truck to be on that route for that day.
Right.
It's almost like a delivery person or a mailman. If I can get my route finished in 3-4 hours, or I need 6 hours to finish my route, it's not like I go back to the post office and get a whole bundle more of mail and go somewhere else, because the routes are all covered for that particular day in that particular time period. Again, the effect would be on the tipping fee.
Right.
And the reverse effect would be, if you generate more recycling, then you earn more. So it's a
Right.
It's like a give and take in that respect. So we average, again, 8,000 tons of trash, roughly 2,000 tons of recyclables.
Right. But I guess then it really does kind of open it. I mean, I guess there's a couple avenues there, right? Like, would it also be more cost effective? When you're going back out to bid for this, is the one-day trash pickup, is that more cost effective than 5 days? I mean, are you going to ask all those questions as we go back out?
I can tell you the one time that it was broached to the selectmen, it didn't get far. In certain parts, like downtown, would be tough to do the bin pickup. Certain areas would be tough to do.
Because you have to go to the one-size bin that they can automatically pick up?
Right, and you'd need access to the bins on the curbside.
Right.
So if cars are parked there, then you're not going to get it done.
Right, okay.
There are pros and cons.
But I did think there's some interesting sort of discussion there, and just based on the fact that we tip more trash than we should, and we could recycle more. So,
Good thing you weren't here during the old Neswick days when we were paying $140 a ton versus $50, $60 a ton.
Right.
I think that's a fair thing, which is, our responsibility on this finance committee is not just what's brought in front of us, but we are really to look at all the ways that this community spends their money and why they spend it the way they do. So I think these are good questions for us to have, and that's a good challenge, which is maybe for each of us to think about that and see if there are things sort of outside of this budget about process and other ways. Yeah. So, thanks.
All right, no problem. Okay. All right, well, I may, check in with the Sustainability Committee, see if they have any ideas, and maybe we could add that in as sort of a bonus session some evening. Because it just on kind of if we're an old Yankee town that doesn't like to spend money, why would we have a trash plan that says, throw away whatever you want every week, no matter what you want? I'm not saying, I lived through the trash fight. I was there with the waving of the trash bag and all that other stuff. But I'm just saying.
Sorry, I missed that.
Oh, no, you're not.
You'll never forget that. But what I'm.
3,400 people at a town meeting in the middle of July.
Yeah.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, like, if it's true that we are, a frugal New England town, why would we do things like that? I mean, why would we just say, like, and I see it, I live downtown, so I see it on every 31st or beginning of the month, move out day. You'll go by, some houses will have 15 bins out, out in front of an apartment house, or, or like Brighton, or Cambridge will have, when students change over. And you think, like, or I moved, and, like, ordinarily, I was like, well, I could pay 1-800-GOT-JUNK to come, or I can just bring it to the curb and have the town take it away, and to a certain extent, it's kind of like, what kind of behavior are we encouraging? And it just kind of frosts me a little bit when I think about it. I'm like, is that like, if we could save $100,000 on trash, on tipping fees, or, some combination of things, we could get more on recycling or spend less on tipping fees. If we could hire a teacher instead of putting trash under the ground or up into the air and, or burning trash, how is that not better for the citizens of the town, writ large? Because probably 80% of the citizens are doing a lot of what you should do. And maybe there's some percentage of citizens who would be, I think the word is like nudged. What's the nudge? Not the stick, but the nudge that just changes behavior enough to affect the town in a certain way.
I think it's twofold. So your comment about working with the Sustainability Committee, there's an economic incentive to recycle, but then on the same token, if there's an educational component in which not only adult residents but children are educated on what our recycling program allows and doesn't, and what the difference between trash and recycling is, and then potentially, you can go to town hall and get a nice green recycling sticker for a bin, right? So to say that these are available and here they are, or potentially on National Night Out, have the town clerk's office hand them out, or something like that, with a flyer that says, here's what recycling is in North Andover, then I think it's a twofold component. So maybe potentially the avenue is to discuss that with the Sustainability Committee, make sure that there's a game plan put in place and there's funds to do that. That kind of educational campaign, as well as finding the economic incentive in order to make older people who may not be as excited about the educational component to recycle more.
Right. When you look at what we do, almost half of Massachusetts cities and towns already dispose of fewer than 600 pounds of trash per capita, and we're at 793 pounds per capita. So that's
20%.
Yeah, that's a good chunk. So I think I'll reach out and just, maybe it's not something you solve, and it's certainly not a problem you're going to solve in, in a discrete event. It might be something that it might be a good metric, like, it might be a good metric for the town to be, to put up on the dashboard. How are we doing? How much are we throwing out per person? How much better could we do? Like, we love to beat Andover. Can we beat Andover at trash?
Actually, I don't know if you know this, but there is a committee in Andover Public Schools right now that are doing a phenomenal job at lunchtime with the kids, showing them what not to throw away, and it's been extremely successful. So, member of the Andover and North Andover, but Andover Moms Facebook group, and they'll post that actually online, and you'll see pictures of just like cartons of milk lined up that children didn't open and didn't use. Forks and spoons that are not in the trash, that are plastic, that are being recycled. I mean, they're doing a really, really good job. So maybe that's something to talk about as well.
Okay. Any other new business?
Okay.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I move to adjourn.
All right.
Second.
Liz on the second? Okay. All in favor?
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
all.